Welcome to Techtastic, the podcast that explores the cutting-edge world of technology and its impact on society. New breakthroughs and developments are revolutionizing the world around us, presenting exciting opportunities as well as complex challenges. We'll explore the big ideas and key players driving these transformations, as we seek to understand the implications of these advancements for our lives, our communities, and our planet. Join us on this journey of discovery and exploration as we navigate the fascinating and ever-evolving world of technology. This is Techtastic.
Paul Crosby, welcome to It's Techtastic. It's lovely to have you here.
It's great being here. Thank you so much.
So, Paul, you've got the uncommonleague.com website, which is a training resource for people that really want to up their game, right? Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah, the Uncommon League was started in 2015. We were one of the first companies that started to do virtual training way back, long before it became, shall we say, fashionable. So we've been at it for a very long period of time. We do things in business analysis, product owners, project management, product management, a lot of the soft skills as well, conflict is being one of them. Of course, our latest and greatest course is positive conflict, how to use conflict for better design and innovation.
Yeah, and you're also a published author with Fail Fast, Fail Safe, right?
Yeah, Fail Fast, Fail Safe. That was my first book. That's all about, harnessing failure and kind of seeing it as not a negative. As, when I wrote the book, I was in corporate America, a large company, Fortune 50. And so, failure was just kind of this thing that you didn't do, right? And you try to cover it up as much as possible, and you didn't learn from it. And I wrote it from the perspective of, hey, listen, failure can be harnessed. It's a part of learning. And when you learn to walk, that's the first thing you do is you stumble and you fall. And, and you thank God that your mom and dad were smart enough to put in shag carpeting with a lot of padding on it, right? So, you didn't get, and I think that's where fail safe comes into play about it. Yeah, you fail, absolutely, but it's failing safe and kind of, making sure that when you do fall, you don't hurt yourself.
Yeah, it's one of the topics that I get into a lot with teams, because the company you were at, I have a little bit of experience with recently, and they're still in that mode of they have groups, they have an entire division that's focused on innovation, and it's safe to fail there, but nowhere else in the organization is it. And I used to really bristle at the idea of failing fast, because the intent is not to fail at all. Right. It's to learn. But when I started interacting with these larger companies and being heavily involved in their leadership, I realized why it was such a good thing to put out there. The fear of failure there is the fear of losing your entire, you're going to lose your job, you're going to lose your career potentially.
Exactly.
Right. But the thing that's hard to teach people is a learning mindset.
Yeah.
And it's absolutely necessary if you're doing a startup or if you're trying to be innovative and you're trying to be disruptive in any space.
Absolutely. I mean, if you're an entrepreneur, and, I started the Uncommon League, a few years back. I mean, it was several brands have kind of come on board, and we kind of, built ourselves up a little bit, but, we were a tiny little company called Bob the BA. And that's where we kind of started. And when you are in this very entrepreneurial space and you're talking about failure and being open to it, it is important, because it is the way that you can kind of adapt yourself and be flexible and kind of refine your product for the marketplace. I really like the mob sort of agile approach to development, where you've got this developer and the customer and your product owner and team members are all in a room all together, and they're hammering it out and they're working out what that solution needs to be. I find that those are the most productive, but you're in a safe environment, right? You're in an environment where you can do that and you can fail and it's okay. And everybody in that room understands, and the expectation is set. Hey, we can fail. We can do this. It's okay. It's just part of the process.
How would you implement that at a very large organization that doesn't have direct access to their customers, because maybe they're an enterprise company, not a consumer-based company?
Yeah, I mean, like for the last company I worked for, and we employed this, we had someone that was knowledgeable. They could represent the customer. They were in sales. They were in the field. They talked to customers every single day. We drug them in, and they were sort of the representative because they didn't want to bring, necessarily bring a real customer into technology. God forbid that a customer should talk to technology. But, and just kind of had that real in-depth kind of conversation going on. And of all the times that I've had these mobs, they were great experiences, right? I mean, you just level set people and set the expectation, and you can get some really solid information out of them and good group context coming out of it. Additionally, you think about it, it's like the Kaizen, it's the process improvement event. It's kind of that same sort of feeling that you need to have everybody in the room that is kind of working on this thing in the room, kind of making decisions. And it works out beautifully.
Yeah, the Toyota method or a Kaizen, or, there's a lot of different ways of being really the same thing. And it's fascinating to me how far some of the formalized processes end up drifting away from the end goal, which is clear, open conversation between the people with expectations and the people developing solutions to those expectations.
Yeah. You
brought in salespeople, and I get why that's a very good idea, because they are often a great representative of the customer, but they also have their own biases.
Definitely.
They know them, and I mean that in a very air quotes around it. They know it, but they don't really. They've made assumptions. This just gets back to your testing.
Yeah, you definitely got to test it with your customers. And at some point, initially you're going to start off with a really good representative of the customer, but at some point you're going to have to physically put this in front of a customer and have them interact with it to get that feedback. You got to do that. There's no avoiding that situation at all, because otherwise you're going to have this kind of, it sort of meets customer needs, but kind of doesn't meet customer needs sort of moment.
Yeah.
And there's nothing more horrifying than, well, it kind of works. That comment kills me every time. And I remember one of the projects that I worked on was a project to revamp a user interface for nurse practitioners. And we revamped that interface, and everybody was like, gosh, it's close, but, not quite there. And, okay, yeah. And everybody kind of got very down and kind of upset about it and all that kind of stuff. But I said, hey, wait a minute, guys, look at where we were before. This was a green screen on a mainframe that was driving nurse practitioners to the brink of utter insanity. You had to know shift function. Ugh, it was just terrible. It was crazy. And I said, are we perfect? No, we're not perfect. And I think we have to kind of accept that Pareto principle of, 80%, 20 is not going to quite be there. Okay, that's good. But let's foster this continuous improvement. Let's continuously improve this. Let's continually experiment. I had a little bit of a battle when people were like, let's just abandon it. It didn't work. Let's just keep with the green screen. Oh. And it was like, no, guys, I think we can do this. And as far as that went well, I mean, it took us a little bit of a battle to get people back on board. And it was seen as this sort of disruptor, which was kind of crazy. But, and then I went to work for another organization, and I put the goal way the heck out there. I know that it really wasn't feasible or possible from what I understood, but I put it way out there. And the team worked like crazy to make this happen. But, there were many times where I had so many meetings with executives and leaders of the organization that were just like, Paul, I don't know what you're doing. This is crazy. You're never going to get there. We have to stay within our box. And it was like, no, we let's do it. Let's experiment and fail. And, my colleague at the time walked into the bullpen, which is where we had all our developers in, and she just screamed. She's just like, take your hands off the keyboard. And it was just like, I'm like, what are you doing? I literally ran from my office into the bullpen, and I'm like, we need to have a conversation. And that conversation is not happening here. Wow. And it was like, what are you doing? I was just like, this is it. We can't do this anymore. There are just too many things that are going wrong. Blah, 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 blah. And I was like, listen, we're working on these things. This is a continuous improvement organization. All this stuff that's coming in here, we're fixing. Here, let's look at the list of stuff we fixed today, which is huge. And we deployed it and all this fun and exciting stuff. And, it's just like, but all I hear is I said, yeah, you're going to hear people that are very negative. But you gotta look at the positive as well. You gotta look at what we're achieving here. And, this is for a big user provisioning and logistics kind of thing. And it reduced their cycle time by 90%. Straight up, first version, 90% reduction in cycle time. And it was a huge accomplishment that got overshadowed by, they didn't have a lack of confidence that it would actually work. And I said, well, here's the metrics. Here's where we are. Here's what we're delivering. Yeah, we are achieving this 90% reduction. In fact, in the next release, we're probably going to get even more reduction in cycle time. And then at that point, I had to constantly reassure them, listen, this is good. We're fine. We're going to make it. Don't worry. It's all good.
As you were saying this, one very vivid memory came up that I was trying to figure out how to even talk to, because it's so specific to that company. But the short version of it is they had been sold this vision of what we were going to accomplish as an absolute by somebody else. It wasn't me. Somebody else had picked up the story and then ran with it.
Yeah.
And when it didn't meet the mark, it was exactly what you were saying. Like, oh, it's only 80% right. Look at all these problems. And I had to sit them down and say, that's infinitely better than what you have. We're working through the problems just like you described, right? Same exact story. But the ultimate win with them was to pull them in and make them part of the whole story too, to give them win with it. It's like, okay, maybe you're seeing a risk that we're not aware of. That's great. Bring it in. Bring that to this conversation. Become part of the iteration, the cycle that we're going through to do this, and won them on as an advocate.
Yeah, absolutely. Include them in that. They got different perspectives. They got different viewpoints. Absolutely. They're going to see things from a different perspective that are going to be able to give you insight into developing a better product. And I think one of the things that I've learned over my career is you kind of have to chunk it up a little bit. You have to look at what the current state is. I can't tell you how many times I've gone into a company and I've said, I need to document and we need to look at your current state and kind of come to a common agreement on it. And they sort of, scoff like, well, everybody agrees what the current state is. And, 9 times out of 10, I'll go in there and I'll do the analysis and I'll come out of that and they'll look at it and they'll go, I didn't know this was happening.
Okay.
I didn't know this was there. I didn't know this. I didn't know this. Really? This happens to you? And, and that's an important part, right? Get everybody on the same page as to where you actually are. And then I go into like this desired state mode. And I'm like, guys, it's leprechauns, unicorns, and a cotton candy field. There is not 1 ounce of reality that needs to be in this discussion. But I want you to go way beyond the box. And I want you to focus on the things that you would see as innovative, the things that you would see as inventive, and the things that would really define us as a product as being, outstanding, unique, and all that good stuff. And, it's changing that mindset from scarcity mentality, the scarcity mentality of, oh my God, there's just so little things that we can do, back to an abundancy mentality of there's a whole plethora of things that we can possibly do. And, I get the pushback of like, well, Paul, if you do that, you're setting unrealistic expectations of their desires because you know that a lot of these desires you're not going to be able to meet. And I said, but that's not the point. The point is that I wouldn't even know they were thinking that. I won't even be able to determine if it's feasible or not had they not come up with that idea in the desired state analysis, right? That they went in there and they just kind of gave me those ideas. I said, you know what? In the next stage, I'm going to be doing that compromise. I'm going to be looking at what we can and cannot do and all that kind of fun and exciting stuff and see which gaps I can close and which I can create and which capabilities are going to work and which aren't.
I'm always amazed at what the assumptions of the user, customer, or business are around what's possible and how incorrect they are versus what's actually accomplishable with the teams. Vastly wrong on both sides. Thinking we can't do things that we absolutely can and thinking that things that are incredibly difficult are simple.
Yeah. Oh, definitely, because they don't understand each other. They assume. And it's like, you got to get rid of those assumptions about, I assume that technology can only do this. And, I assume the business can only do that. It's like, no, you got to get rid of those assumptions. You got to get into a room and just, really focus on being inventive and innovative and not make those assumptions.
There's no such thing as can't. Let's figure out what's desired.
Yeah.
I can't remember who gave the quote of when you shoot for the moon and you miss, at least you're amongst the stars.
Oh, yeah.
And I always loved that as a way of talking about that. It's like, guys, the ideal state, what's the perfect world? Well, we'll never be perfect. Right. But we'll be a lot closer to it if we try for perfect.
Yeah. Nothing in this life is perfect.
Ever.
I mean, there are moments of perfection, right? Definitely, my wedding. Okay, that was perfection. But, that took frickin' 3 years of planning, right?
Wow.
So, there was. But, you have moments of perfection and you really strive to get to that level of perfection. Absolutely. But, a lot of it just comes down to luck. right? If you truly are going to get there, you're not going to be able to get perfection all the time. There's something's going to go wrong. It's Murphy's law, if you will. There's always going to be something, and it's kind of dealing with that and understanding that the world isn't a perfect place. It is imperfect, and your role here is to take this imperfection and make it just a little bit better.
100% agree with you. My current motto seems to be get in and get going.
Yeah.
Get experimenting, figure it out, because the chances that what you believe today are correct are pretty low. You might get 10% of it right on the first try and then 20% on the second, et cetera. Like you can build up towards a close to ideal state, but you're never going to get all the way. So just get in and get going. You mentioned earlier the adult learning pattern tends to be experiential learners, which is get in, start doing it, and learn from doing it.
Absolutely. Yep. You can't move unless you experiment in some way.
Fantastic. Paul, it was lovely having you on. Is there anything you want to say with the last couple of minutes to the audience?
Thank you so much for having me on the show. I really appreciate it. Obviously you can tell I'm really passionate about the positive conflict and fail fast, fail slow stuff. And as you as well, I had a great time. I really appreciate it.
And that's a wrap for this episode of Techtastic. I want to thank you personally for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Until then, keep exploring and stay curious.